You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof blew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you doing, Kevin?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for making some time today to talk about Skwala Fishing. You guys, I've been using some of your gear recently. I want to talk about that. It's been pretty awesome. And I just want to dig into a little bit on gear. You guys have waders and some great coats. And I want to talk about, how you guys do it differently, because I think that there is a ton of gear out there and it's hard sometimes to understand, especially like with waders, right? Things that easily, even on this last trip I was on, I mean, literally on day one, I had a leak in my foot. Right. So I want to talk about that, how we avoid maybe some of that stuff. But before we get into all your gear, let's talk about how you first got into fly fishing, and we'll take it into Skwala.
Yeah. So my start in fly fishing goes way back, and it's a story actually I love to tell people because it's a little bit about recruitment and getting people into the sport. So I had a lot of interest in fishing when I was a very little kid. My dad did not, but he took me to a Trout Unlimited Barbecue when I was 10 years old, actually on my 10th birthday. Date myself, this was long before river runs through it and kind of the boom of fly fishing. But I was just kind of fascinated. I'd never seen anyone cast a fly rod. I'd been, spin fishing a little bit. And there was a guy there that did a casting demonstration. And I think I was kind of mesmerized with it and watched it. He found this little kid who kept watching him. And he spent about an hour with me after he did his casting demonstration, teaching me how to cast a fly rod when I was 10. And on the way home from that event, my dad took me to the fly shop that was kind of the only fly shop that was local to our house, Eiler's Fly Shop, which is no longer, but bought me my first fly rod. And Tommy Eiler, who ran and owned that shop, kind of mentored me all the way through my teens up until when I started guiding when I was 19.
Wow, so this is pretty awesome, the Trout Unlimited. So that's interesting because your dad wasn't into it, but you really, where did the fishing bug, was that just born into you? Like, where did that first come from?
My earliest memory of fishing was me trying to catch sunfish with a safety pin and a piece of string and bread. Wow. And I was pretty young then. So yeah, I think I've always just been fascinated with fish and outdoor stuff. I love to hunt as well. And kind of that pursuit and figuring out what makes critters tick. It's always fascinated me.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll probably talk a little about the hunting too as well, because I do a little bit of that. But Trout Unlimited, there's a lot of great groups out there, and TU is definitely one of the big ones in fly fishing. And so that's a pretty good story, right? If it wasn't for that, who knows? But you found a mentor, and that's really what it's all about, right? Finding that one person. Is that, when you look at people that are getting into it, or at least you talk to, I'm sure, a lot of people that are customers, do you find a lot of people that are beginners that are finding you, or do you find people like, who is that ideal customer for Skwala?
For us, being kind of a premium, very performance-driven brand, our customer base is not really the newbie. We're more of people that are pretty advanced. Today, at least, our customer base, given the type of product we make, is more the advanced guy, kind of looking for what's next, what can give them a better day on the water, really looking for that performance edge. And that's generally a more, advanced fly fisher.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that from the waders to the jackets and everything. But let's your background is interesting just in the outdoor apparel and your experience. So talk about that, because I don't know the whole history, but bring us back to first, how did you get into that part of the industry? And then who were some of those big brands that you worked for and helped really scale up?
Yeah, so I kind of refer to it as like my first real job. So I started guiding when I was 19 and guided and managed a fly shop for a while. And then when I was about 25, I went to work for Orvis in product development. And that's really the foundation of where I learned technical apparel and really learned product development process, probably most importantly. I had some great mentors there. Jim LePage sat next to me, who actually just retired a few years ago, but had a great career at Orvis and was the president of SA. And Jim taught me a lot of what I originally learned about, how to build great product and how to understand unmet needs in the market and create really great stuff. So that's kind of where I got my start and foundation in the space. And then went on from there with a few other premium brands, but really cut my teeth in technical apparel when we started up Sitka. So I was involved in the Sitka business truly from day one, and I led that business for close to a decade. And so for 2000 end of 2007 through 2017, that's really where I spent my time really focusing on how do we build the best apparel for an intended end use. So really a deep understanding of the end use, and then how do we solve those problems and give people a better experience in the field, on the water, et cetera.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. And that's the one, for those that don't know, I'm sure a lot of people do, because we have a lot of hunters that are also fly anglers. But yeah, I mean, Sitka is a huge brand. And I don't know, we'll probably talk a little more about some of that story there. But essentially, yeah, I mean, it seems like it's a market leader, right? You think about some of the other outdoor brands. Sitka is, as far as the hunting. Did you guys, when you were there, was it always hunting, or did you start expanding out into other things? Did you ever think about, fly fishing or angling, any of that stuff?
Yeah, so Sitka was always hunting. And, what we had learned with that brand as it grew and really got to know our consumer really viewed us as a hunting brand. And, some of that really stemmed to the evolution of me going into to start Skwala. We were looking at the market and how people were innovating. We were seeing what we were able to do in the hunting space with technology, textiles, different ways of looking at design, and looked at the fly fishing space and said, we really think there's an opportunity there to bring all these things that we've learned over the last decade or so in the hunting space to bring that into the fishing space. And so that was really the, original idea for this, was to build a brand that would really push the limits of innovation, from textiles, from design, from how we cut and fit our product, which in some of the stuff I think you've been in, you might notice that there's a different way to get at product. Our fit's quite a bit different. We implement stretch in a lot of places that's unique.
It's more like clothing, right? I think of everything that it seems like what you have is really, it's not just a pair of baggy waders you're putting on. Everything fits. Like, how do you do that? How do you make it? Because everybody's different, small, large, big, right, skinny. How do you make that product that fits, well for the diversity?
Fit is a huge challenge in apparel because there's no defined large. The large is what we determine a large to be. For us, we start textile first in design. So often what we do is we identify a end use that we want to hit. So this could be, we want an ultralight, packable, but high performance rain jacket, for example. And then, so how do we go about that? And we generally start with textile first. And in our case, we often develop our own textiles.
And by textile, describe what that means exactly.
Our fabrics. So before we even design the product, we are often diving into the fabric that will deliver the best performance in the end use. So if we're intending to build a ultralight rain jacket, we're starting with a textile that's going to meet those needs. It's going to be waterproof enough. It's going to be breathable enough. It's going to be supple enough, meet our expectations on durability. And then from there, we build the garment kind of around that. And it's a different way to kind of look at product. But what it allows us to do is understand how that fabric, that textile is performing and what it can do, how much stretch we have in it, and things like that. That really dictates the type of garment we can build. So our carbon jacket is kind of what I'm talking about here. The carbon jacket is a 4-way stretch, waterproof, breathable jacket. It's 3-layer, so it's got great durability. But because of how we designed it and built it, it packs up really small and it only weighs 15 ounces. And because we were able to build stretch throughout that garment, we can actually get into a much more fitted piece, where historically a lot of wading jackets are kind of bigger, a little bit more boxier cut, a little bit more designed for you to move inside of it. And we want to build garments that move with you. And so it's a little bit different. Our stuff doesn't have that big boxy feel. It's definitely more fitted. And that carries through our waders, our jackets, everything we do.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you got me thinking when you're talking about the different, kind of benefits, features, whatever, of the products that, Tim Rajeff was on. He was talking about the Echo rods. And I asked him, how do you make this thing? Everybody talks about how durable the rods are. And he was, straight up, he basically said, hey, in fly rods, you have 3 things you can have. It's like, I think he said durability, how light the rod is, and how fast, I think, was the other thing. And he was like, you can't have all 3. You got to pick 2. You could have 1 or 2 of the things, but you can't have all 3. And like with Echo, they chose, durability and I think, the action. But it's not the lightest rod maybe, right, or whatever. But do you find that with clothing too, where you can't have everything and you have to kind of choose, like you want it light, you don't get it? How do you look at that?
Yeah, all of this, whether it be fly rods and apparel, quite frankly, it's a bit of a physics problem, right? And as we talk about like waterproofness and breathability, that all comes into that as well. One of the things that we have found over the years is the ability to bring stretch into the equation definitely adds durability, because like in apparel, it gives instead of tears. So we're actually able to do very light, very durable, and high performance. But some of that key is the ability where we can bring stretch into the equation.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And that's one of those things, like you said, I think of a lot of gear I've had in the past that was just stiff, didn't stretch at all. And you could see it. That's an easy place to break down. So on the waders, let's go to the waders. I want to talk about the hoodie I've been wearing too, but talk about your waders, because I think that's one of those things where, first of all, you get a pair of waders. How long do you expect them to last? And then also, how do you keep them lasting? But how do you guys also, is stretch part of the waders, or talk about how you guys put that together? Because I know that's a big challenge and an important product.
Yeah. So we don't implement stretch into our waders yet, I would say. I think that's a great long-term goal, very challenging from a material standpoint. But what we really focused on with the wader is we stepped back and said, how do we build a wader that truly fits? And from day one, when we stepped into the concept of how we wanted to build our waders, mobility was kind of number one. And we said, how do we get it away where we have a wader that moves with you, not a wader that's either stiff or boardy, but also big in the thigh and big in the hips and kind of designed for you to move inside of it? How do we build one that almost wears like a pair of pants? And that was our goal that we set out to do. And if you really take a look at our waders and the patterning and how they're built, you'll notice they're quite a bit different. And where we started was what's called with a fourchette. And I'll try to describe this as quickly as I can. But a fourchette is, if you think about gloves, when we were kids, gloves were these flat, stiff things. Now we have these gloves that literally match the shape of your hand. And a lot of that design is done via a fourchette, which is a piece of material that goes down the outside edge and it shapes the glove to basically the shape of your hand and fingers, allows for much better dexterity. We took that same concept and started with a fourchette down the side of our wader, which basically shaped the wader to your body. So we can control where the articulation is in your knee and in your hip. So now we can build a wader that fits your body almost like a pair of pants. And then we build the rest around it. So what we've been able to do is a pretty lean chassis for the wader. Our wader looks more like a pair of pants, quite frankly, than a big bulky wader. But because we can control where all the articulation points are in the wader, we're able to get this fitted wader that gives you an incredible range of motion.
Right.
And that was really where we started in thinking about how we would make a product that was truly different and change the market. And then from there, we got into all the materials. How do we build durability? How do we build puncture resistance? And how do we maintain breathability, which was really important to us across our whole product line. Is our view is let's keep you dry to keep you warm. So breathability, whether it be in a jacket or in our wader laminates, et cetera, is really important to us.
Nice. Yeah. And I mentioned the waders, and I've worn all types of waders. The ones I had this week, I won't mention the brand name, but everybody knows about them. They're a giant brand. And but I think it's, it just goes to the gear, right? I mean, all this gear isn't going to last forever. It's gear. It's going to wear out. But talk about that, like maybe give a tip or two here. Like somebody has a pair of waders, maybe they're a brand new pair. How do they make sure these things last? Well, first, how do they do that? And then how long would we expect them, if they take good care of them, to last?
Yeah. I mean, the longevity thing it's always an interesting question, because it really comes back to what are you doing with them, right?
Right.
If you're fishing out of a drift boat, the vast majority of your time and then getting out and waiting a bit, waders should last hundreds of days. If you're running through blackberry bushes in Pennsylvania, I was just actually back in central Pennsylvania last weekend fishing, and there's a lot of really sticky stuff back there. The best thing you can do there is be careful and not just blast through blackberry bushes kind of thing. But it truly depends on what you're doing, right? If like a pair of waders for guys that are fishing out west in drift boats, they should last years. But, the other thing on wader care is it's an interesting topic. In all technical gear, keeping your gear clean helps it perform better. And I've seen this for years and years. Like, people are afraid to wash like a $500 hard shell jacket. The reality is you should wash it. It'll perform better. It'll breathe better. The DWR will work better if it's clean. We're talking about jackets or waders. It doesn't really matter. But if you've got dirt and fish slime and gink, ground into that textile, your breathability is coming way down. The face textile is going to wet out. It doesn't mean your jacket's going to leak, but it's going to become heavy and wet, which also severely inhibits breathability when that happens. And then on the inside, you've got contamination from body oils and things like that. And by washing your garments and getting all that stuff out, reactivating your DWR, it's just going to perform better. And we kind of feel the same way about waders, which is an interesting one because I think very few people wash their waders.
Yeah, exactly.
I do. I wash mine.
Yeah. What do you wash? What is the typical, are you throwing them in what do you wash them with and where are you washing them?
Yeah, there's a couple things to be careful with here, which is why I think a lot of people don't recommend it. First and foremost, you have to put them in a front load. If you put them in a top load with that agitator, with that column in it, and it gets wrapped tight around that will do a lot of damage and or wreck your waders. We actually, as a test for garments and durability, there's a test called a killer wash. And essentially that is an old top load washing machine with that agitator, and you run garments through it until they literally start falling apart.
Oh, wow.
And it's brutal. You can take a washing machine, take the dial off, make it a switch, and run a jacket or waders or anything you really want to test from a durability standpoint. You can run it for 20 hours, 30 hours.
Oh, wow.
I can tell you when you get in around 40, things are coming apart. So you don't want to do that to your waders that are yours.
Gotcha. So you got to go to the laundromat, get a front.
Yeah, or your front load at home is fine. I use a tech wash like from a Nick Wax or Granger's, but front load washing machine, in my personal opinion, is fine. Don't run them on a heavy duty cycle, and also turn your waders inside out because you really want to wash the inside the most because that's what's connected to your skin and everything. And then a medium to light cycle, and I think that'll honestly help your waders over the long term. If you can take things like, you don't want belts flopping around in there. You don't want harnesses. So if you can take that stuff off before you wash it, that's better. And then, in terms of drying and what you want to do, so I like to retreat my stuff after I wash it. So I'll turn them right side out, spray them down with a DWR treatment like a Revive X.
And what does DWR stand for?
Durable water repellent. The best way to describe it is when you have a brand new jacket, you'll know it beads water up really, really well.
Oh, yeah.
And over time, that will degrade a bit. Just as with dirt, this is kind of why I think it's best to wash your garments. Keep them clean. But by washing it, you can reactivate that. But over time, it goes away. And I would prefer my gear to bead water as best as possible. So after I wash it, I treat it. And then you can hang dry it or very carefully light dry in the dryer. You definitely don't want to put it on high heavy duty in a dryer for sure. So ideally, hang dry them.
Yeah, hang dry them. Exactly. And do you recommend just on the daily, you go out there and you fish, you're fishing for a week or whatever, do you recommend turning them inside out, drying them like that? Or is that necessary to do each day?
Absolutely dry them out. Your body, you're perspiring all the time. So the inside of your waders are damp. Your feet for sure are damp. And the best thing you can do for longevity, right, is keep your waders dry, hang them up, don't put them away wet, that kind of thing. All of that is going to degrade the life of your waders. And that's the other reason to keep them clean, right? You put them away damp, wet, you start, in a worst case scenario, you start getting mildew and all that. And then you have a real problem. And quite frankly, a product that's going to fail.
Yeah. The hoodie that I just got off a trip, I was up north in BC and, typically up there, it's, it can be cold, but it was really hot. and we had a lot of sun. I wore that. Describe that. Do you remember what that shirt was? It's the hoodie that's got a mix of wool blend in it.
Yeah, so we do a handful of things in merino wool, which is kind of interesting given that we spend all of our time on being very technical and understanding the best technologies to give you a better day on the water. Merino wool does some things that synthetics don't, and especially when you get into these like ultra fine merinos. So we do a handful of insulation layers that are almost pure merino wool. They're like 95% ultra fine merino. And then we also did a sun hoodie, which is the piece you had, which is called Thermo 150. And it is a very lightweight, ultra fine, 17 micron merino. It's about as fine as you can grade merino down, with a blend of nylon in that one. So it just kind of holds its shape. Unlike poly, it doesn't absorb odors and things like that. So it has just a little bit of nylon in there to help with wicking and keeping its shape, but it performs and behaves like pure merino wool, which means you can wear it for days on end. And
that's what I noticed, because I did wear it all week. We were there almost a week, and all my other stuff, I was like, man, I was having to wash, all my other clothes because they were, the synthetic stuff. It was getting stinky. But yeah, I mean, that shirt, I didn't do anything. I literally just put it on. If it got hot out, I'd dip my sleeves in the water, and it was a cool. And what's the, the hoodie style, where there's different styles now, but that one comes up and kind of covers almost up to your mouth, right? It covers your whole head. It seems like that's the go-to design now, right? For the sun.
Yeah, that's our go-to design. All of our sun hoodies, whether they be synthetic, we do some hybrid pieces, we do merino, all of them have what we refer to as a scuba hood. And so rather than having kind of a, across the chest, ours sits all the way up on your chin. And the other thing about our hood is it's long. So if you want, you can make it sit all the way on the end of a bill of a hat. So now you almost have this, if you want to have that much coverage, with our stuff, it's an option. We feel pretty seriously that we're a performance apparel company, and that should go not only to waterproof, breathable, or insulation, it also carries to what we do in sun. We put just as much thought into the textiles on a wet weighting sun pant as we do into anything else we create. And, protection from the sun is a big deal, especially some of us that have been around in this industry for a long time. And some of my friends and myself that, were guiding 30 years ago. Some of us weren't as smart as we should have been back then. We didn't know what we know today. No. And, all element protection has become an important thing for us. So you'll see in our stuff, everything's 50 UPF or higher. And then we really focus on things like our hoods and stuff to give you as much protection as you can get.
Amazing. Yeah, that's it. And I love that definitely the hood, the way it's it's form fitted, you don't even notice it. It's there, but it's great. Talk about, merino wool is something we've heard a lot about for years. Just give us a quick little snippet on that. What is merino, and then what would be a non-merino wool type of thing?
Well, explain a little bit about why I like merino in this space and why we kind of lean into it. So one of the things with merino wool is it's warm when wet. And by that, I mean, not that, your products are leaking, but that, you're always perspiring underneath this stuff. And especially in a wader, like we love merino wool as an underwater pant. A wader is a really high humidity environment, right? Underneath there. And so when you have a material like merino wool that has this kind of warm, cozy feeling, even when it's slightly damp after you've been perspiring for hours on end, the reason it's able to do that is merino actually holds water in the fiber. So to get really technical, it can hold about 30% of its weight in moisture. And what that does is it kind of keeps that warm, cozy feeling, even when it gets a little damp. Where synthetics, you get what's called evaporative cooling, where it actually wicks really quickly. And specifically for like under a hard shell underneath waders, as a insulation layer, we love merino wool. And it kind of performs it differently and in a way that you can't necessarily duplicate with synthetics. And in fishing, which is not a real high aerobic output activity, normally speaking, merino wool, that heavier weight merino wool is fantastic.
Yeah, it's almost like, as you were describing that holding, I was almost thinking almost like a wetsuit. I mean, not the same thing, but is that the same thing? Like where a wetsuit gets in there and it warms the water up? Is that kind of what the merino's doing?
The thing with merino is it's holding the moisture in the fiber itself. So it's almost like absorbing it a bit like a sponge. And it's actually keeping it away from your body. So you actually don't feel wet, but it does keep that warmth property even as it builds up moisture.
Right. That's cool. And And describe, you've got, a number of other products. Maybe just give us a little snippet on the line. I know like the jackets, like the insulated, and I'm not sure if you guys have a Puffy line, but talk about maybe some of the other important items that you guys have coming that are out there now and then maybe are coming in the future.
Yeah. We kind of view our product line as a kit. So we build everything from skin to shell. So next to skin, base layers, insulation pieces. So we do a whole line of Fusion, which is our Puffy jackets, and we have 3 different things that we do there.
Yeah, and let's do that, Kevin. This is just got me thinking because we are going to be heading out to the Great Lakes in December for steelhead this year, and it's it could be cold. So let's line that up. If somebody right now is going on that trip and they're going to put together that nice setup from you, what would that look like? Start with the base layer.
I would start with Merino for sure. And then I would build into our Thermo 350, that's like a heavy fleeced merino wool. That's kind of like an expedition weight top, if people are familiar with that, but all done in merino rather than synthetic. And then from insulation, true insulation, 3.2 Puffy, our Fusion 3.2, and that's going to be our warmest insulation piece. And so that's like 90 grams of insulation in your core. Your sleeves and your arms are 60. So we kind of body mapped the insulation to more insulation where you need it and more mobility where you don't need it. And then from there, a hard shell over the top. In that case, our hard shell kit would be like our RS line. We do carbon and RS, and I refer to them as the bookends both in waders and outerwear. Carbon is highly breathable, lightweight, packable. Our wader's convertible, so it's really designed to wear as a waist high. So you get breathability, really great for cold water, warm temperatures. I always think about like the Henry's Fork, which it might be 95 degrees, but the water's 52 degrees and you're definitely not wet wading.
Right.
Or guys are fishing spring creeks and things like that. To RS, which is more of our full featured bomber type product. So we don't do good, better, best kind of philosophy. We don't have a opening price point and a mid price point and a high end. Everything we do is the best product we can build for that intended end use. So a carbon wader and RS wader, neither is better. We get asked that all the time. What's your best wader? And my response is, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But if you're going steelhead fishing in December, where you could be very cold, absolutely RS would be our kit. That's kind of our bomber wader. It's full zip. It has fleece lined hand warmer pockets, and then our RS jacket, which is kind of designed to kit with it, which has some kind of unique features. Like we do pass through pockets on that line up with your fleece lined hand warmer in the wader. So when your hands get cold,
nice.
You're not just putting them into a jacket pocket. You're actually putting them all the way in next to your body where you have your pre-warmed pockets to body temperature, which, if you get true Michigan December weather, you might really appreciate that.
Yeah, nice. And going back to the insulated, the Puffy, describe that. I mean, if you're wearing that, and what happens if that thing gets wet? You stick your hand in the water. Is that a major issue? Because it seems like that's one of the things with it. Now, is this down or is this synthetic, Puff?
It's synthetic. So everything we do is synthetic, actually, for that reason. We talked a lot about this because down's really fantastic as well. But synthetics have gotten so good from a performance perspective over the years. And when we talked about whether we would do down or not, one of the things we came to the conclusion is we are always around water. And, in a scenario in December, well, we'll use your scenario you're walking into.
Yep.
If you do fall in, down would be a less ideal option.
Right.
than having synthetics that on.
Yeah. And I always think of the sleeping bag analogy because there was a time where I remember my first sleeping bag Puffy was synthetic. Shout out to the Cat's Meow, the North Face. And
I have one of those too.
Yeah. I mean, it was this bag that said, I can't remember what it said, but it was a 0-degree bag or something. But I always froze my ass off in that bag. And, and then when I finally got a down bag, I was like, wow, I am never going back to a non-down. And to this day, I still buy down. I don't get synthetic, but that was a long time ago. So what you're saying is, and I'm sure the sleeping bag technology is maybe a little bit different, but what you're saying is the technology, just synthetics with the puff stuff now is way up than what it was, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we've been able to do some pretty unique things there. So we've been able to develop stretch insulation. So a couple things happen when you do a Puffy jacket. They're either kind of completely locked up, which means they're coated fabrics, so the fibers, the down doesn't pull through, and those don't breathe really well. And then we've moved over the last 10 years or less into active insulation, which you have a Puffy, but that's fully breathable. We've been able to take that one step further and develop a a full 4-way stretch, breathable puffy jacket. So doesn't inhibit any range of motion when you're casting, when you're, arm up, rowing a boat, high stick nymphing, whatever you're doing. Our range of motion's really great in that piece because it's a 4-way stretch puffy, but we're also been able to do fully breathable as well. So you don't get wet and clammy underneath it.
Now, fully breathable, this is on the puff?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's a pretty unique product to have a 4-way stretch breathable puffy. And so breathes really well, keeps you dry. You don't perspire underneath it, but it's also very warm and doesn't inhibit your range of motion at all. It's one of our favorite pieces, actually. I would say it's the one piece that every single person that works at Skwala wears all the time.
Yeah. I was going to say that is one of those items that you have to have some type of a nice puffy, because it's perfect, right? You're around. It seems like, I know that with mine, I wear a lot of, jackets that are just not synthetic, right? That are just natural down. And the nice thing is, it seems like even in the summertime, you could wear that stuff, right? In the right conditions. Is that because of the breathability? Is that kind of what you're saying there? Is that it doesn't have to be, it's not just for a freezing cold day? Correct.
What we found is when you get the breathable, air permeable puffy, you have a much larger range of temperatures that you're comfortable in. Like our 3.2, we'll wear that when it's 60 degrees out, 55 degrees out, but also we can wear it when it's below freezing as well and be totally comfortable in all scenarios.
There you go. Nice. And on your site, I was noticing, I think you had some new stuff for 2023 beyond. When you look ahead, are you always thinking, okay, how are we tweaking this current thing? Or do you have these things are just dialed where you don't have to think about that? Or how do you think about future years, new products?
Yeah. I think the DNA of our brand is a constant flow of evolution. So, and given that we're kind of building product to intended end use as opposed to building product to like price points, that will probably limit our line somewhat, right? I wouldn't expect to see a dozen waders, with the Skwala name on them. Today we're really kind of building, I refer to as the bookends. It's that kind of light, fast, super breathable, and then kind of our bomb-proof, full feature set, durable side. Though our carbon waders, the durability is fantastic. We've got lots of guides with well over 100 days on them. But given that's our kind of our DNA of how we look at product, for us, you probably won't see a huge product assortment because it's pretty specific to what we try to build. So there's still lots of holes for us to fill, but I would say we'll focus as much as on the evolution of what's that next generation of the carbon wader and what it's supposed to do. So it's that cold water, warm weather. How do we get better breathability? How do we get better puncture resistance? How do we evolve the design based on just what we learn over years and years of use?
Yeah, exactly. How do you, if you are that person that bombs through the brambles and you're just diving into the crazy stuff, how do you make that wader a little more durable so that, that crazy person or the person that is really tough on their gear, how does that thing last a little bit longer? That's always the thing that's part of the thing, right? Because I've had waders definitely that I've done that and they've lasted and they haven't leaked. So, I don't know if it's the model, the brand, or if it's just I got lucky on one. Do you think when you build these things, right, do you feel like all these waders that you make are basically identical, equal, or are there variations in the, like in the models, the lines, and all that stuff?
So I'd say in the same model, like our consistency should be pretty good, right? It should be very consistent. There's a couple things that you chase in waders in particular. Durability kind of comes from two areas. It's either puncture resistance or tear resistance. Actually, those two things kind of fight each other a bit. To get great puncture resistance, you actually it really comes out of your face textile and how tight you get that weave. So the tighter the weave is, the harder it is to kind of poke through it.
Right, but less breathability, right?
Yeah, and also, as you get tighter, you'll lose a little bit of breathability. If you get too tight, you lose tear resistance. So, there's lots of ways to kind of wreck this stuff. And one of them I kind of say is death by 1,000 cuts, which is, the guys that run through blackberry bushes and wild roses, things like that, where you just get a lot of pinpricks. And so we focus a lot on that.
Yeah. How do you fix that? So you go through some brambles and you get some pin things. Is that when I know people talk to you, term inside out, spray alcohol on them? Is that the recommendation to find those holes if it happens? Or what do you tell somebody if they're kind of hard on their gear?
Yeah. So to get to tear real quick, it's almost easier to fix a tear that we can find and we can do a very permanent fix on that. The 50 pinholes down your shin is a lot tougher to fix because you literally have to coat it basically to repair it.
Right.
And so repair for us, we use water. There's a couple different ways to test a wader. You can either use air and you can submerge your wader. So you can kind of, if you know where the hole, you think you have a leak below your knee, you can fill them with air and you can submerge them in a tub and look for air bubbles. That will honestly probably show the smallest holes. The other way, we test with water. So our test for every new wader that goes out the door is fully tested. It spends 12 minutes on one of our testing machines, which is fully filled with water. So we're testing with water to keep water out. But to test our wader at home, I'd recommend filling them in a tub and looking for where the leak is. You can either do it with air and submerge it, or you can turn them inside out, fill them with water, and look for where that leak is. And then I mark it with like an expo marker. And then, at home, you can use, like a tenacious tape or a repair kit from Gear Aid. If it's a tiny pinhole, you can just use Aqua Seal or one of the UV glues. Or, in our case, we're happy to repair them too. And so if we fix them, we'll fix them with tape. So basically the seam tape that keeps the wader waterproof on all the seams, we'll be able to patch out of seam tape and heat press it, and it'll be a permanent, for the life of the wader kind of fix.
Nice. So basically, yeah, I mean, maybe talk about that a little bit on your warranty. So if somebody buys one of your products, your waders, whatever, and they have an issue, what does that look like? What do they do? What is the warranty?
We kind of do two things. We do a warranty and a guarantee. So our guarantee is 30 days, love it or leave it. So run our waders, and if they're not your favorite wader you've ever worn, send them back to us. We feel really strongly that we're building a fantastic product. And then from a warranty standpoint, it's materials and workmanship for the life of the product. So seam tapes, things like that. Again, you get in a fight with a barbed wire fence, that one's on you. We're happy to fix it for you. But yeah, lifetime of the garment for materials and workmanship. So our textiles and our build. Wow. So this is literally a lifetime guarantee. If you get a pair of waders, you have a lifetime warranty. So I'd say lifetime of the garment. So you see interesting things come back in the wader world. Right. Yeah. Well, one that I've seen again I can't remember. I think this was the waders that I saw a seam on the foot, like the neoprene boot, and I'm not sure, exactly how that looks, but essentially the seam on the neoprene, I think the tape part of it was peeling. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know. I mean, I wore them out. But again, is that something where you could easily fix that? Just glue it up? And is that something where, do you do that yourself, or do you send something like that in? On neoprene, I would for sure send it in. Neoprene's a bit tricky because it's soft. And in that scenario, we would just replace your full booty. And that was part of the actually R&D of our waders. We do know at some point in the life of every wader, they're going to leak. It's just kind of a fact of life. Yeah, it's Gore-Tex, right? Or is it Gore-Tex? It's not Gore-Tex. I know that's Gore-Tex, but that's what would you call that? Because there's different names for that type of material, right? Yeah, so we use Gore-Tex is a different laminate material. We use a PU-based laminate, which doesn't really have, Gore-Tex is a brand name. And Gore-Tex has become, it's like, what's that thing, right? When the brand becomes the name, like Kleenex sort of thing. Sure. People. Yeah, I can't, but that's essentially what's happened, right? Everybody just says Gore-Tex, but there's all these different brands that are maybe better than Gore-Tex that are out there. Yeah, there's multiple ways to get at waterproof and breathable, but the two main ones are what Gore-Tex does, which is a material called PTFE, and then the other way to get at is from a membrane perspective is PU-based membrane. We use a PU membrane. We like PU because we can fine-tune breathability and waterproofness. So depending on end use, in certain scenarios, you'd want more breathability. Like everyone thinks they want waterproof, and all of this is waterproof. But there's certain levels that you can get. If we're going to build a jacket for people that are, a guide in Alaska who's going to spend 100 days in the rain next summer, we've leaned them into like more of our RS jacket, which has a more waterproof but slightly less breathable membrane. You don't get both. Right. We use a more breathable membrane in our carbon jacket, but certainly can handle rain. Like I'll fish in the Olympic Peninsula, in February, and I wear a carbon jacket because I just love the breathability. Oh, wow. Right. Yeah. And, that's in your neighborhood, and how wet that can be. So you're still getting pounded if you get one of those days where it's just you're getting drilled for the whole day. The carbon, even though it's the lighter stretcher, it's still going to keep you dry. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I just prefer the breathability. I tend to wear our lighter, more breathable stuff. Steelhead fishing in BC, and when I get into winter steelhead, which is something I love to do, Then I'll kind of step into our heavier gear. But for most of my year, I'm running our lighter weight stuff.
That's right. And where are you at? So steelhead. So if I guess just changing it, looking at your fishing nowadays, are you kind of thinking like, hey, I'm out there everywhere trying to hit everything? Are you diehard steelhead? What's that look like?
I love to steelhead fish. If I had the time and could spend August 1st through October swinging for steelhead, I would. But yeah, honestly, I like it all, because I think what gets me excited about fishing is like that pursuit and figuring it out. I spend more time chasing carp this summer in August than I did fishing for trout, because those things will drive you crazy. We have outside of the area I live, we have some really great carp fisheries. But I love all of it. I like Spring Creek fishing. I like swinging. I fish Trout's Bay quite a bit. Oh, nice. And come spring, I love heading south and chasing saltwater stuff around. So. I was going to say, yeah, so saltwater too. And with your gear, do you have, some of this gear is going to work in salt too? Are you thinking about saltwater? Yeah, absolutely. Our sun stuff, one of the things that we did that was really unique in our pant, our sole pant, the material, the best way to describe it, it's kind of perforated, so it has small holes in it. You can feel a 5-mile-an-hour wind blow right through it. And so it makes it for a fantastic flats pant. And in our sun hoodies, we do we do merino like what you had, but we also do a tropic hoodie, which will give you a little bit of the idea of how we think about product. We went all the way down to the fiber level before we made yarns and started working with a fiber that has a dry hand. It almost feels a bit like tissue paper. So in high heat, high humidity environments, standing on a flats boat in June in the Keys, it kind of keeps that dry feel to the garment. And it's very light. Oh, wow. It's an extremely light garment. And it's synthetic? It is a synthetic material, yeah. Yeah. How does that compare to, say, and I'm not sure, I think I might have asked you off air before about this, but like bamboo? Because you have this bamboo, because it seems like I've worn some bamboo stuff that's really, I think there's disadvantages too, right? It gets really stretched out maybe, but the material itself seems to be nice. Do you guys have bamboo, and is that something, how do you compare that to your other stuff, your synthetics? Yeah, we don't do bamboo. Bamboo has a beautiful hand, when you touch it, so a lot of people like it. It has some downfalls when it gets wet. It doesn't like to dry really well. We tend, on our sun stuff, we tend to lean into poly. We use antimicrobials in them to keep them as scent-free as possible. But we do a couple different things that are all application specific, just like the rest of our line, right? So we build a tropic hoodie that's very, very light, still maintains 50 UPF sun protection, but is a very light textile and has this very dry kind of feel to it, to a hybrid piece that's partially knit, partially stretch woven, doesn't absorb water at all. It's in the arms and shoulders and things like that. So kind of a different end use, but we tend to use, unless it's the merino stuff, we tend to use poly for almost all of it. Yeah, perfect. And what about boots? Do you guys do boots? We do not do boots yet. Yeah, I was going to say, is that looking ahead, is that something that you're thinking about? Some of these things, right? There's a whole line, like where do you all these things. How do you decide on what is the next big thing that you guys are going to jump into? Yeah, I think our goal is any place that we think we can leverage our skill sets here as a team and bring our technology to give you a better day on the water, we're going to go toward, right? So if we find a better way to skin the cat in footwear, and we think we can deliver a perceivably different product, then we'll go down that road. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think footwear is interesting too, because I've worn lots of different boots out there, and it seems like, some are a great fit, some are not, but I find myself now, like, maybe it's just older age, but, putting in like the super feet right into my boots, because it gives you a little, especially like me, I'm out there, I'm doing a lot of hiking, I'm standing, especially if you're sitting there in a run, you're just standing on your feet a lot. But no, that's really cool. I think that that would be great to see you guys come out with some other new gear looking ahead. Well, I guess anything else we're missing here just on the line before we start to take this out of here? Any other items that you want to highlight for folks that aren't aware of Skwala? I think not really in particular from a product perspective. I think the thing for people to look at with us is just kind of how we look at the space differently, and how we've been able to implement, really unique technologies, whether it be stretch or air permeability or breathability in places that people haven't seen. Just how that gives you a much more comfortable day on the water. Like I always say, you're winning in technical apparel when you forget you have it on. That's when you know you did it right. And that's a lot of our goal here in everything we do is, how do we build a jacket that you don't realize that you have a jacket on? Yeah,
that's totally it. Yeah, when you forget about it. I mean, if you're sitting there thinking about it, it goes for a lot of things, not only gear, but even like podcasting, right? I mean, if you're thinking about the audio quality, you're listening and you're like, oh my God, that's not a good thing, right? You want people just be into the conversation. So, and I think that people can look at Sitka, right? I mean, that quality gear, you were there. I mean, I think that again, it's pretty, I don't know if it's unprecedented, but all the high quality stuff that came out of there was pretty amazing. And I'm guessing you're taking that, you're bringing a lot of that over to what you do now. What was that transition like? Give us that little background. So you're at this, what looks like, I mean, a company you built into a massive company, and then you start this new thing. Was that a little scary? What was that like? Take us back there.
For sure. I mean, it's always scary jumping into a new thing, and especially the timing at which we did it. We did a lot of R&D right in the peak of COVID in 2020.
Oh, wow.
And without the team that I'd had around me. So, the early first couple of years of this business are all R&D for years before we came to market. And a lot of that team that was with me, designers, developers, and my factory team that was getting this all going, we'd all been together for, in some cases, almost 15 years. And so we all knew how to work together. We'd developed a lot of really great product together over the years. And so part of that was, we know what we're trying to do. We know where we're trying to get, and we just need to get there and figure out how to get there. And I had the team that I totally trusted to be able to get us there. Designers I'd worked with for years that understood what we were trying to do. And so, I don't know that this would have happened, quite frankly, without that crew.
Exactly. This is not like just you jumping in there, solopreneur, like going for it. You got a whole thing behind you.
Yeah. And a phenomenal team that's how we're able to do this.
That's cool. And what about, so just tell us on the Skwala and the, kind of the logo and stuff, because, I love that, but where are you kind of a nerdy bug guy, or where does Skwala, that idea, come to be?
It didn't really come from being a nerdy bug guy. Though, in Southwest Montana, where I live, we are kind of in the heart of the Skwala fishing. But, when we were searching for naming's always hard. You never like whatever you come up with when you come up with it.
Right.
But we came up with a handful of names, and we kind of tested them with people that we knew, really fishy type people. And we kind of go back to them. And Skwala was one that we had come up with, and it stuck with people. A lot of people don't know what a Skwala stonefly is.
Oh, really? Yeah. A lot of people don't realize it's a stonefly, right?
Yeah, it is. But we didn't really name the company after that. But there were some interesting things about it. SKW is interesting in the English language, which is why I think it's sticky. It starts with squall, which is really interesting for a technical apparel company.
Oh, right. Like a squall,
yeah.
like a storm.
Yeah. And, the other side of for those that do chase the Skwala hatch, and for those that don't know, it's a pretty large stonefly that comes off only in a handful of rivers, kind of in the northern Rockies.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have them. That's the thing, is that we don't have the Skwala hatch.
Yeah.
Where, yeah.
It often comes off in the end of March and early April. And people don't realize, we're fishing big dry flies when you can find the hatch.
How big are these guys compared to, say, the giant Terra Narcissus, right? The big giant salmon fly.
Oh, yeah. They're not that size. They're like a size 10. But when you've been fishing midges all winter, they look huge. And when if you get lucky enough to hit a great Skwala fishing day, the fish blast them. It's really fantastic. But, it's a hatch that a lot of people don't know about. And a lot of people who do know about it don't talk about it. And so there's a bit of if you know, and we kind of like that
right.
for building this new premium brand. We thought that was kind of a cool connection too. So hence Skwala came to be.
Right on. Well, let's take it out of here real quick in our quick little rapid fire round here. I got a few quick ones, and then we'll jump out. And I like to start with always on the music and the podcasting, because I love to throw something in the show notes. But when you're on the road, are you listening to music? Are you listening to podcasts? What's that look like?
You know what? I do. I've been on the road a lot over the last few weeks. I would say I go 50-50. Okay,
there you go. Perfect. So if it's music, what is that music you're throwing in there? Band, song, something that we could throw in the show notes?
I could tell you yesterday, I was driving home yesterday. I had about a 4-hour drive yesterday, and I split it between a fishing podcast, a kind of like a business digital marketing podcast, and ended with Dave Matthews Band Radio on Sirius.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh, right. Dave Matthews Radio. Yeah. He's got perfect. All right. We'll figure something out to throw in there. And then on the business podcast, give us what was the business podcast, or what's the one you listen to?
I really like Scott Galloway. I think he calls it the Prof G. I've kind of followed Scott Galloway for years. I think
cool.
he's a great thought leader, especially in the digital space.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't heard of him. I'll check that one out. Perfect. So we got a couple of items to throw in the notes. What's your, for rod? You've got only one rod that you could fish. Let's just take it, I guess, to trout. What's your go-to setup?
For locally around here, if I'm fishing bigger rivers in Southwest Montana, I think my go-to would be a 691 Sage X.
Okay, and that's and what is that, a 9'5" weight, or what's your weight length?
9'6" with the fighting butt on it.
Yeah, 9'6". Oh, right, with the fighting butt. So this is something where it's interchangeable. You could throw that in if you need it.
No, it's permanently on.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha. All right, and we talked a lot about the travel. Give us your trip. So what's the next big thing that you haven't done yet that you'd like, kind of that bucket list trip?
That I haven't done yet. I've had to cancel Cuba twice. So I think that's very much on the top of my list. So I've got that. And I think potentially next spring, I've never done a dedicated Atlantic salmon trip. And being this guy loves to swing flies.
Yep, me too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I just, as I spend more and more time doing this, the experience is more important, right, than anything else.
Yep.
And I've not spent time in that part of Canada. And
yeah. So you're thinking Canada. You're not thinking Norway. You're thinking definitely Canada.
Yeah. Specifically, the Restigouche is where I want to head. And then my next real trip, it sounds like I'll be in Terrace here in a little bit less than a month, I hope. So right back where you just were.
Yep. That's an amazing. Yeah, we had a really cool experience. Definitely got a bunch of fish. And the one thing that blew me away about this, and I never would have thought this was going to be a really cool experience, but I hooked a fish that just basically tore me up. It was like, oh my God, right? You're freaking out, all this stuff. You finally get the thing in, and you're like, wow, that is a chrome bright coho salmon. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And it just blew me away because I never think of that. We don't really have that same. You can't do that down here, find it. But I think that species is one that's very close. There's nothing quite like steelhead level, but so I think that's the cool thing about Terrace is that especially we were fishing the main stem, the skeena. And you have a chance at catching, at least when we were there. And if you go earlier, you might catch a king as well. So that's kind of the cool thing. But you guys are obviously focusing on steelhead. What's the biggest steelhead that you've ever seen caught, or have you caught? What's currently? Are you looking for that 20-pounder?
Yeah, I've cracked the 20-pound mark.
Oh, nice.
Actually, this is pretty funny. It's going to tie back to who you were just with.
Oh, yeah.
So in the Thompson, back when we could fish it, and there were still fish in it, which is a real sad thing because, arguably the greatest run of steelhead ever. I got one on a skated dry that was over 20. And interestingly enough, I know you were just with Brian Niska.
Yep.
And this was a long time ago, but I ran into Brian on the hotel run right below the Garuda Inn. There's a couple big boulders down there, and he said he had just had one boil on a dry and told me exactly where it was. And he said, let that thing rest and go back at it. And sure enough, I did. And that's my biggest steelhead I've ever put my hands on.
No way. Oh, that is a great story. So Brian hooked you up and you went down and did it.
Yeah, just randomly, like we were talking while he was walking up the river and we were coming down. And that was a really special place, which, I don't know that we'll ever see that come back, unfortunately, but those fish were incredible.
Yeah. Well, while we were there, one of Brian's guides, she was downstream. I wasn't on the boat here, but they landed. I think it was the 20-pounder. It was pretty close to it. I think it was a female. But so there's definitely still those fish are out there, right? There's still a few of those big ones. And I go back to my 13 years ago when I was there, and we were on the Kispiox, and we got skunked that day, but the guy landed, I think at the time was maybe close to the world record. Or it was just crazy. I think it was like a 40-pound fish. So it just shows you, right? Steelhead fishing, right? I mean, we got skunked. This guy catches this mammoth, whatever it was, 30, 40-pound fish. But I think Atlantic salmon, that's what's cool about that species as well, is that there's some big fish, right? You have a chance at potentially a 40-pound fish still. Is that the case where you're going? Are there still some really big Atlantic salmon?
I don't think there's anything in that class. There might be. I mean, maybe there's one or two a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that there's much in that class in those Canadian rivers, but
yep, cool. Well, and I'll just highlight Topher Brown. We had him on recently and had a bunch of great feedback. He's got a book on Atlantic salmon. We're going to have him back on as well. And I've got some pretty big surprise steelhead guests that are coming back on it to talk about some stuff too. So I think we'll leave it there. Kevin, if you have, obviously we're going to be staying in touch, working together here, moving ahead, but we'll send everybody out to skwalafishing.com if they have questions. And And yeah, man, thanks for all the time today and shedding some light on all the gear. I'm excited to keep testing your gear out, and I'm a little rough on the gear, so I'll let you know how it all goes. But thanks for everything you do out there.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country, so if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are, and I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.